Sorry for being a couple minutes late, but I'm going to briefly introduce our next moderator for the next panel, which is focused on community engaged research. And moderating the panel will be Ada Acobta. Ada is a PhD student in the Department of Earth System Science and is also one of the Climate Justice Initiative Fellows.
Thank you, Kathleen. Hello, everybody. As Kathleen said, I am a CJI Fellow and a PhD candidate in the Earth System Science Department. And within the department, I am working in the Human Systems Group, where we do research that kind of bridges the gap between the science and the people, which is what a lot of us here do. So that is why I'm always very excited when I get the chance to learn a little bit more about community-based research, which makes me super honored to introduce to you today our speakers, Connie and Dr. Jun. So, Dr. Connie McGuire. Connie McGuire, she has a PhD and an MSW, and is a co-founder and director of community relations at the Research Justice Shop, Newkirk Center for Science and Society here at UC Irvine. Connie is a cultural anthropologist and a Latin American by training and has conducted ethnographic research across Latin America and with Latinx immigrants in the United States. She specializes in community-based research methods that center community knowledge in research practices that aim to respond to our most pressing social and environmental problems. Connie is also trained in social work and several trauma-informed or wellness-centered approaches to group facilitation. She uses these skills when collaborating across power differentials, in particular in community or university partnerships with communities that have been harmed by and who thus often rightfully are skeptical of traditional university-based research practices. So please give a round of applause to
I hope I have a mic now. Yes, but we've got yes. Thank you so much, Ada, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you all for being here, and to Kathleen for inviting me. It's been such a joy to become part of the climate justice community that's emerging through the Climate Justice Initiative and for the Research Justice Shop to be in partnership with BJI this year. And moving into the future, starting this year. So I'm going to be talking about kind of a program, less about the specifics of a research project. So I'll just kind of. How do I get this to go forward? Sorry, click. There we go. Okay. So I'm from the Research Justice Shop. We, myself and Victoria Lower from Brados, established what is now the Research Justice Shop in 2018 through seed funding from the New York Center for Science Society, which is a cross-disciplinary center research Irvine. And the center wanted to increase its community engagement capacity or its investment in building the bridge of community-based organization, which was a part of its mission, has been a part of its mission since the beginning, but it was less well developed. So we started the program. Initially, we were called the New York Engagement Initiative. Then we were called the Community-Based Research Initiative. And sort of over the course of a few years, we've come to land on Research Justice Shop as really encapsulating what our vision and mission is. And so that's more recent. We rebranded to Research Justice Shop a couple of years ago now. And sort of as part of the clarity of our vision. So first I wanted to just talk a little bit, and so this is me and Victoria, we're the co-directors, and we very explicitly have a co-director as like a feminist practice of bringing multiple ways and multiple perspectives together as a way of directing and sort of moving away from the singular leader model. And we definitely envision having more directors as we get funding and are able to grow. And we have been able to bring on a postdoctoral scholar, Brianna Ramirez, who is supporting a lot through pedagogy and supporting some other fellowship programs on campus, including the Research Justice Shop Fellowship and the Environmental Racism and Health Equity Fellowship Program. And so first I just want to kind of position myself a little bit. So especially as someone kind of working in the research justice space and racial justice space. So I'm a white American. And my ancestors came to the United States mostly from Ireland in the time period just before the Civil War. Okay, and settled in the Midwest and California. And I grew up in Washington, D.C. In the 80s and 90s, where my parents had both moved from the Midwest. Inspired by John F. Kennedy to work in the federal government. So they were sort of kind of liberal leaning white people kind of wanting to make a difference in the world and very much connected to that Irish identity. And so, you know, I grew up in DC in the city with racial and economic privilege in the context of a lot of racialized structural violence. And in the context of a very segregated city, basically, and not segregation. And so I grew up with like explicit anti-Black racism, as well as many insidious forms of racism, often in the context of kind of white savior narratives or do-gooder narratives. In addition to a lot of super inspiring activist work that, of course, has been happening in DC forever, for a long time. And so also kind of in the mix of all of that. And then I really began to sort of think about and understand some of that as I moved into college and studied sociology. And I studied sociology and women's studies and really got training in what we now call kind of intersectional feminist analysis. So that's kind of some of my training. And then I was also in all of that time was a feminist and queer activist working on campaigns to call out sexual violence, also doing sexual violence prevention, and later working in multiracial queer political organizing in San Francisco, where I moved after I graduated from college and been on the East Coast. And my early academic work was in the activist anthropology tradition, which is where folks kind of work alongside themes. And I did that in Mexico City in particular. And then so later worked in human rights organizations in DC again, moved back to DC and worked with an international Latin to what is now my work in community-based research happened during my postdoctoral scholarship or fellowship here at UCI, where I worked in a lab that was situated, collaborating with folks in the nearby city of Santa Ana, working on I was in the project for about 4 years, but a long-term health initiative that was aiming to address the social determinants of health in a community, a largely immigrant community, largely low income, that we're working on like a variety of different topics. And that is also where I met Victoria, as she was a graduate student researcher on that project. And so we were both really building relationships with many, many different folks in the city of Santa Ana and across Orange County, who were on the ground doing work, in organizations, either in actual nonprofit organizations or just in community groups, to try to improve their circumstances and make changes, often political changes, right, around about their situation, their circumstances. And so these were mostly BIPOC and BIPOC-led and BIPOC-serving organizations. And our work has most recently been focused on building programs to support students at UCI to collaborate with those organizations. So I kind of moved from doing research myself to this program role of trying to sort of expand the numbers of people who are able to do this work and thinking about how these collaborations across university and community partners can happen. Let's see. Yeah, and so one way you might think of what we're doing is we're trying to kind of institutionalize community-based research and support collaborations. All right, so this is our mission and vision and values. So we founded the shop to transform research practices inclusive by facilitating equitable collaboration between the university and the impacted by collective social. We do this by collaborating with led and by serving community organizations. And we value relationships, diversity, justice, inclusion, transformation, and humility. And I'll talk a little bit more about the values as I go. But just to kind of get at what research justice is, so I don't have the citation there. Sorry, this concept and this visual comes from the group called the Data Center. And this is dated from 2013. The data center no longer is a functioning entity, but I always like to come back to this particular visual because it's sort of the origin of the term research justice. And the fundamental thing that, there's a lot of ways to critique this and a lot to take from it and be very generative. But I think the fundamental message that we take away from this is that really moving from this idea of kind of like one form of knowledge being the most important form of knowledge, and like here they call it mainstream knowledge. I think in academia we might usually refer to it as like technical knowledge or socio-technical knowledge, right? So knowledge that comes from certain kinds of training and certain kinds of access to tools and education. And so moving from kind of that understanding of what knowledge is to the idea that there's multiple forms of knowledge and that multiple forms of knowledge are needed and important in certain practices, especially when we're talking about research that is supposed to inform and support some kind of transformation of social inequities, environmental inequities. So it's really like a structural critique and a revisioning of knowledge production, going from the dominance of mainstream or socio-technical knowledge to valuing the integration of multiple forms of knowledge. So they refer to cultural and spiritual knowledge, experiential knowledge, and then this mainstream. And so we think of it as a framework that research justice is a framework that communities and researchers use to confront social structural inequities in research, in the research process itself, and transform exclusionary research paradigms and practices to broaden participation in research and make research processes and products more inclusive, equitable, and just. So now just kind of the why. I think we're all here pretty much know the why, but just to reiterate, right? So there's a couple of different whys. Like one why is the disproportionate impact of social and environmental problems on Black, Indigenous, and Latinx in particular populations. So these are some examples that came from, around from CDC that are related to health. So across the country, communities of color experience higher rates of poor health and disease in a range of health conditions, from diabetes, hypertension, etc. When compared to their white counterparts. Thinking about the pandemic, we all saw, if we're talking here about kind of disaster, right? So in the context of the pandemic, we all know that Black, Hispanic, Latino, someone kind of shut in comments. I'll just allow it. And that person we're more likely to be hospitalized, die of COVID-19 compared to white people. And then in terms of housing, communities of color disproportionately experience housing security displacement with worsening impact expected during the pandemic. So, this is probably not new to anybody, but it's sort of one of the whys in terms of the problems. But then there's also it's a little. Okay. Then there's also the history of violence of research and practice itself, right? So I'm going to read this longer quote from this really great book called Decolonizing Methodologies from Linda Tupi-Wai. So she says, the term research is inextricably linked to European imperialism and colonialism. The word itself, research, is probably one of the dirtiest words in Indigenous world's vocabulary. When mentioned in many Indigenous contexts, it stirs up silence, it conjures up bad memories, it raises a smile that is knowing and distrustful. It's so powerful that Indigenous people even write poetry about research, the ways in which scientific research is implicated in the worst excesses of colonialism remains a powerful, remembered history for many of the world's colonized people. So while knowledge from these communities, of course, is important in addressing disproportionate impact and also learning about how to ameliorate social and environmental problems, those communities are often rightfully skeptical and distrusting of research. So this is the space that we're in. Yep. Sorry, I'm a little, there we go. So then how are we doing what we're trying to do in this space? So the first, so that's sort of a summary of how we do our work. The first thing I want to say is that we use this word shop, so research justice shop, which we think of as, when translated into Spanish, we translate it into taller, which means workshop. So it's a space, it's a space where we're working on things together. It's a space where there is dialogue, collaboration, trying to figure things out together. It's not a space that one comes to get all the answers that are already in a box and set up for you, right? So we're really in a space of bringing folks together to work through things. And that includes people who are facilitating all of the processes. They're always learning as we go. So this relates to, I think it was what Nicola was talking about. The model that we're working with is really in response to our conversations with community partners over the years, this sort of long-lasting partnership and collaborations with community-based organizations. So creating structures that can kind of hold a space that builds a bridge between the 2-year grant cycle, right? So that folks can continue, and through fellowship programs, folks and organizations can have a consistent place in which to engage with support for their research needs, even as grant cycles come in and out, right? We also partner with PIs on campus, for example, with the Climate Justice Initiative, just bringing in so we're kind of sort of the methods and facilitation support, and then with PIs on campus, they're kind of like subject knowledge expertise that may be relevant to any given research problem that community might be interested in. So we're focused on training and learning. So been historically mostly been working with graduate student fellows. This year we have postdoc fellows, and then we're just moving into starting to create spaces for faculty and staff as well. And we have been doing, hopefully soon, we're in the final stages to start publishing or distributing some institutional research about challenges and facilitators of community engaged research for faculty and staff, and the people who collaborate with them. And then we also participate in the sort of global community of folk who are in a few different settings. And so these are our current partners. So Madison Green Neighborhood Association is a neighborhood association and nonprofit organization in Santa Ana. Orange County Environmental Justice is a county-wide environmental justice organization that Mara mentioned. Sacred Places Institute is a new partner that we've started to collaborate with through our relationship with Kathleen. Sacred Places Institute for Indigenous Peoples is a partner here, and we have fellows working with them this year. And then the Crystal Cove Conservancy, we've had fellows working with them for the second years. And then I just wanted to mention Climate Justice Initiative. PI is Kathleen, and then WeCan, which is a new grant. It's just getting up and started. The Wildland Urban Interface Climate Action Network, which does not yet have a logo, but it will soon. So those are and so this was sort of this sort of really gets at the crux of kind of how we are doing our work. So we run what we call a workshop series. It's a 9-part workshop series, and it's geared towards graduate students. It happens across the whole year. It's 9 sessions, and it's built around 3 themes, which are relationship building, like doing or practices, and products and closures. That's one for each theme. And so, and it's sort of around a cycle. Maybe you might think of a cycle of action research. And so we really emphasize relationship building sort of as a contrast to extractive models of research, right? So, supporting folks to think about how to have a relationship first with the people that we're collaborating with. So that often means showing up and doing stuff that isn't necessarily specifically related to your research, right? So coming to a meeting, just getting to know people, learning what people care about, listening skills are a lot of what we talk about in those early sessions. Sort of doing one's homework, so doing research about kind of what's happening in the place. What are the structural conditions that folks are living with in the place. Even if you have a very technical kind of set of expertise that you think might be useful, that is relevant to folks there, what's the broader picture, right? Reading about it in the newspaper or looking at their website, etc. And we also work with this idea of a commitment practice, which is really supporting fellows or students in this work. So this workshop series is open to the broader community of graduate students, and then we have a fellowship program that's more intensive thing. But so commitment practice is basically a process of getting really clear about why one is doing the work that they're doing. And it's an ongoing process of revisiting a commitment, and then having practices as a way to return to that and stay centered on that in one's work. And it really helps people to answer the question, why am I in the room? Like, what am I doing here? Which can sometimes get lost, like people can get lost in that, or can get hyper focused. That's very technical, right? So sort of supporting people to like widen and be open to understanding the broader context so that they can answer the question of all the stuff that's going on and what is my specific thing that I'm doing. It might not be only related to their expertise, right? It might be like to certain kind of social or environmental justice too. So then the doing is, one of the key parts of this meeting is really about co-design, right? So, and this is reflected also in the fellowship program. So it's not coming in with an already designed research project and asking people to come onto it, but it's coming in and saying, you know, this is the kind of stuff I know about. And I know that you all are talking about this. What do you care about X topic? So let's say water, you know, what is it that you all care about in terms of drinking water? How could we work on that together? Or do you want to even work on it together? Maybe they say no, you know, and so then we also support folks to think about the different kinds of agreements. So first, community agreements, or just agreements about how to work together, having those explicit conversations, and writing them and then revisiting them over time, right? Because things can change. Obviously, all different types of situations are very dynamic. So like a research team, people may come and go. There'll be new people, also community setting, right? People will come and go. Revisiting agreements as people come in, you're learning how to work. And then just kind of skills that are often really supportive and helpful based research projects are around listening and documenting. And then lastly, the last theme is about products and closure. And so thinking about multiple forms of products, like obviously the academic journal article, what kinds of formats of information might be useful that are related to the research that you might be collaborating on. So this often looks like things like infographics or things like intermediary steps of sort of maybe data that's not completely analyzed, but it's enough just to like inform people, this is what we've done. So it might just be a meeting where someone comes with a few PowerPoint slides and says like, we've talked to a certain number of people, or we've gathered this amount of data, and this is what we know so far. Just keeping people in the loop about where things are going. And then also sometimes including community members, community collaborators as co-authors on those academic articles. So this is the fellowship model. So this is the more intensive version. So the workshop series is over 9 months and anybody can come. And then the fellowship model is for a smaller group of people. And I just wanted to talk a bit about this. Just to show kind of how we do it and how it bridges over multiple years. So basically in the springtime, folks from RJS and potentially different co-PIs who have kind of subject matter expertise do co-design meetings with the community collaborator, with those organizations that I mentioned, to think about what kinds of research projects, a group of fellows, a team of fellows, the fellows always work in teams of 2, and they're usually from different disciplines, ideally, what kind of projects they might work on the following year. Sometimes we already had a project, and there's an interest in just continuing that and letting it keep going and just finding roles for fellows to continue, or sometimes maybe that project's coming to an end, or sometimes it's a new project. So I start that co-design process in the spring, and there's a lot of, it's iterative and it goes back and forth over several months. And then the fellows participate in lab meetings on campus where we kind of are reflecting on their process in the research. And then they also have regular meetings to sort of continue designing the project and then eventually figuring out what the methods are going to be and implementing it over the course of the year. There's some variation for different levels depending on if the company is still like an already existing project or if they're starting something. And then there's a real focus on producing a final product together that is relevant for the organization, right? So that by the end of their fellowship term, they have something that both the fellows can show and the organization can show, and that's useful for something. And that can look like different things. Sometimes it's like a very internal product, and sometimes it's more of a product. I can talk about that later if people are interested. And then also the fellows, do one kind of blog post, kind of communication piece. I think I'm getting close to time, so I just want to mention a couple of. There we go. So one thing I wanted to mention here, I'll stick to the second point, is that funding agencies are increasingly requiring participation of impacted or disadvantaged communities in research proposals. So that's coming from the different federal agencies. And reviewers are increasingly looking for evidence of existing relationships between university-based researchers and their partners. Even like, now including research partner, community-based research partners as co-PIs on these grants or sometimes as PIs. And then also looking for allocating equitable funding for community members on research time on projects is increasingly rewarded, right? So that's also like evidence of like, yes, these folks are equitable partners in this project. And then there's also obviously a conversation, maybe not obviously to everybody, but this bottom point, there is a conversation kind of within university settings about how to recognize this work within tenure promotion, because as someone, I think Nicola mentioned, right, like it takes a lot of time to coordinate and work collaboratively, even within the university. And that's also true when we're working community-based research settings. So a couple of challenges I wanted to mention, and this also came up in Marla's talk. So if we're gonna be bringing community-based work into grants, university financial assistance aren't designed for partnering with community-based organizations. The processes are super complex, and they require just a lot of time that we don't necessarily have, but they have to be involved in order to get the funding. And then, like for example, university budgeting forms don't have appropriate categories for community partner roles. So we'll have folks be like, well, are you a vendor? And then the organization's like, I'm not selling anything. I'm not a vendor for a nonprofit organization, and sort of these miscommunication and challenges that happen in terms of systems. There's also the issue of inequity in pay. There's high overhead rates from the university that really impact the amount of support that a community-based organization can get in these big funds, in these big grants. So there's like really high dollar amounts, and then so much of it goes to overhead. There's just a vast inequity when you think that that overhead, it goes to the university, right? It doesn't. The nonprofit organizations really miss out on a big portion of grants that they're putting huge amounts of time into. And then again, I already mentioned the time. So this is just the research justice how. So the big takeaway is moving towards research justice, and again, this is like a vision and an aspiration, not necessarily a destination. It's an ongoing project. It requires structural changes. And it also requires relational changes. So these two things like interact with each other. So those are kind of the big takeaways about what our approach is and what we're doing. Lastly, thank you. Follow us on social media. One reason to do that is because we are hiring right now for a scholar and an academic coordinator to work on the WECAN, the Wildland Urban Interface California Action or Climate Action Network. Which is also a collaborator of CJI. So both of those positions are posted on our LinkedIn, and we're just looking for applicants. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Connie, for that wonderful presentation and for sharing with us the work you do through the Research Justice Shop. And my apologies for rushing you a little.
Thank you.
So next, we're going to be hearing from Dr. Jun Wu. And Dr. Wu's interest focuses on population-based research of environmental exposure assessment, environmental epidemiology, and environmental health disparity. She has extensive experience and knowledge in examining the joint influences of various environmental exposures, for example, air pollution, climate, built environments such as green spaces, and socioeconomic factors on reproductive outcomes, for example, maternal health and fetal health, children's health, and other health endpoints. She also has a strong interest in research on environmental justice and environmental health disparities, particularly working in partnership with communities. So this morning, Dr. Jun Wu will be presenting to us or sharing with us on on translational environmental justice research aiming for health equity, case studies in Southern California. Are we almost ready? There.
I think it's okay for now. Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Ada. It was this great introduction. And thank you, Catherine, for inviting me to be here. It's so nice to see all of you here in this room and also those online. It's just like great pleasure to present some research and especially the collaborative research project we do with the community members here in Southern California. I have to say I'm really, really humbled to be here and to present this work because this is a great community and academic collaboration with many people, like community leaders, community members, and my colleagues at UCI and the students and staff. All of those contribute to this success of some of the projects we do together. So I'm here just to like tell the story of the communities. And so it's not me, it's not my work. So I just want to put that ahead. Okay, so first, I want to briefly talk about the factors that contribute to environmental injustice. And first of all is like place-based disproportional exposure. Think about people living close to freeways, to landfill sites, to hazardous waste sites, to industrial emissions, right? And then there are also unique exposure pathways, such as farmers who are exposed to definitely more pesticide exposure, more of the other agriculture chemicals, and also children. They may be more exposed to lead through their activities, through their hands to mouth activities. And then there are also multiple and cumulative risk and impacts. So a lot of times, those disadvantaged communities, they are not just bear one burden of exposure hazards. They have multiple burdens, cumulative exposure from air pollution, from contaminated water, and from indoor hazards and outdoor exposures. So therefore, they have this increased burden from cumulative exposure. And then there are also, I can do this, not move my, and also, a lot of times they are vulnerable. Right. Yeah, thank you. They're vulnerable due to multiple reasons. For instance, in African Americans, they have much higher risk of asthma in children compared to whites. And they also have a higher risk of asthma in infants, and also higher rates of death from breast cancer, et cetera, et cetera. So therefore, these populations can have a double jeopardy or triple jeopardy because of environmental injustice. So here, I'm going to present two case studies. And one is about the contamination problem in Santa Ana, California. The other is about air pollution problem. First of all, for the lead exposure problem, we all know that lead is a hazard and that especially for children, developmental issues, and there's no safe level of lead. And I think just past week or two, it's Lead Awareness Week for at the national level. So I hope some of you know that. It's just saying that lead is such a hazard we want to avoid any lead exposure. So here back in 2017, a reporter Yvette Cabrera from Think Progress published
her results in Orange County, where she used a portable XRF sensor to test lead in the soil, and she found that Santa Ana, which is a city, a very highly dense city in Orange County, with predominantly Hispanic population and a lot of immigrants. And this area has a lot of lead in the soil, and she published the results, and there is recent concerns of the local residents, especially the youth. Okay, you can see that. So the youth really raised the question of how much of the lead is in the soil overall in Santa Ana, because the event study is only like spot sampling, and also she used the portable XRF, which is not the best standard method to measure lead. So and also what would be the health impact of the lead to the local children? So because of that, the youth group and the Orange County Environmental Justice Organization and the UCI researchers, including my colleagues, Dr. Lana LeBron, Dr. Abby Reyes, and students from UCI, formed this PRONO Santa Ana Collaborative. So in Spanish, PROMO is lead, and PRONO means no lead in Santa Ana. So this collaborative started in 2017, and with a goal to develop a better understanding of lead in the soil and in other sources in Santa Ana, and also its impact to children. Then in 2018, this collaborative did sampling of actual soil samples in Santa Ana, in every census tract of Santa Ana, with at least 3 samples in each census tract. Overall, we collected 1,500 samples at more than 500 locations in Santa Ana. So pretty dense sampling. And then we also did analysis of lead in the lab, and then did the spatial analysis of lead. As you can see, we have very fine resolution lead in the soil in this entire city of Santa Ana, and you can see the hotspots. And the thing is, we found lead in some very high concentrations in certain locations, and the variation is very high. You can say the low versus high, there's magnitude of difference by census tract. And then also we looked at lead exposures of different subpopulation groups, and you can see that first one is household income. The lowest household income group compared to the highest income group, the lead concentration is about 5 times higher in the lowest income group. And also we looked at the other risk ethnicity parameters, and all of them follow the similar pattern. And very alarming is that you can see the C here, the children, the percentage of children. Actually, the census tract with a higher percentage of children have a higher lead exposure. We all know lead is very bad to children, right? So this is really a concern to all of us. Then we want to understand in terms of the soil lead, what are the major sources? Because we know EPA and other government agencies have done a lot in the past to remove lead from different sources. So despite this work, why we still have lead in the soil at high concentrations? So we collaborate with Jun Wu. Jun Wu was doing his PhD in the Department of History at UCI. You can see this is really multidisciplinary collaboration. And he is interested in the historical sources of the contribution to environmental injustice. So, and he went to the library of Orange County and got some maps, very old maps And then he digitalized these maps in terms of the roadway network. You can see the left side is an example map in 1931. And then he also digitalized the parked vehicles on the road. And then based on that, we develop our matrix of exposure, like the density of road, the distance road, and density of cars back like 100 years ago. And then we did our statistical modeling to see what is the contribution of the historical traffic versus the contemporary roadway and traffic. And we did say that contemporary traffic does not contribute as much as historical traffic. And we also look at other sources like the age of the house, because that will introduce leaded paint to the outside soil. And we also looked at industry emissions because Santa Ana has a lot of metal processing companies. And what we found after putting all these factors together is that traffic, historical traffic, likely contribute the most to the soil contamination in Santa Ana, followed by older houses. And the industry in Santa Ana does not seem to contribute that much compared to the two other major sources. So, and then, as I mentioned, this is truly collaborative work with a lot of key players and a group of UCI graduate students led by Tim Schultz from anthropology. And they developed a video and submitted it to the US EPA Environmental Justice Video Competition 2022. And they won the first place. And I'm not sure here, but they also, this is for phase 1. And then to show the problem, and they also won the first place for the phase 2 competition, in which you actually want to develop a solution to the problem. And their solution is to work with Orange County Environmental Justice to do bioremediation. And so that work is ongoing. And then I also want to mention a little bit about the Santa Ana general plan. So every city needed to have the general plan, which is a blueprint for city's development. And usually don't update this very often. 20, 30 years, you update the general plan. That's very crucial to have the environmental justice piece in the city general plan. And in 2016, the state of California mandated that each city or county, when they update their general plan, they needed to include environmental justice in their plan. So Santa Ana was in the process of updating the general plan in 2020, already pandemic. So it was a challenge. And also it's the first time to put the environmental justice in their plan. So in the first draft of the plan, it's just very basic. And they they're going to be conducting environmental health assessment and some very generic language with no teeth. So then the community organizations, including Orange County Environmental Justice, including Green MPLA and other community organizations, they worked very hard with community members and also academics, including myself at UCI, to provide like evidence and to voice their needs of the community environmental justice needs. So and this process take more than 1.5 years, and finally this general plan update completed and approved in April of 2022 last year. And you can see I'm very happy to see that there are some accountable language there in the general plan, and here. One is to have an environmental justice in the city government, like to oversee the environmental justice work and make it accountable. And then the other thing is that it explicitly puts some language saying for the environmental justice communities, the Orange County healthcare agent local stakeholders such as Orange County Department of Justice and UCI Public Health are going to help the communities to do like blood testing and other things to reduce the blood lead levels in children. So that's the first case study. And then the second one about air pollution, also in Santa Ana. So this work is mainly led by the community partner Green MPNA. In Santa Ana, this is a grassroots community organization. And the story also happened at the similar time of 2017. The background is that there was a metal processing company called Brostech, and this was originally located in Irvine, but then which is UCI locates, and it's a relatively affluent community. And this company decided to move from Irvine to Santa Ana. And this, our whole Southern California area is under the jurisdiction of South Coast Air Management District. And the South Coast Air Management District issued letters to local residents for the site where the Brostech will be located, and required the residents to reply back within 20 days. However, this is in English for the letter, and we know that most of the local residents are speaking Spanish, and a lot of them only know Spanish and do not speak English. And a lot of them also have a busy life with 2 or 3 jobs. So the story is that then after the 20 days, there's no issue raised, and the Brostech company was established as the industrial corridor. So you may not see them well, but the purple line of this map shows the industrial corridor. So the local residents finally found this out, and then they checked with South Coast Air Management District and found it actually regulates more than 40 facilities in this what they call industrial corridor. And this corridor is very close to the residents. You can see on the left side, those are all high dense residential locations and 2 elementary schools and 1 high school. So, and also in this area, this is a map of Orange County. And Santa Ana shows higher rates of pediatric asthma emergency room visits. And you can see the zip code in red, which has more than double of the pediatric emergency room visits in comparison to the median of the Orange County. So local residents really raise the concern about the industrial emissions and the high asthma pediatric visit rates. So then Green MPNA takes the leadership of working with the community members and also collaborating with the academics to do some air sampling of the local communities. So they call like these are just some pictures from those sampling events, and they tour around the communities, identify the potential emission sources, and also they do a toxic tour. For the toxic tour, they are equipped with sensors. The air sensors are like very small air sensors, and then they do measurements of the community. You can see this map shows you the Santa Ana community are design of the routes for their monitoring events. So we have like in the very middle, this is our focus area, and then we further increase to the outer area and further increase to the larger region. So basically these residents on several days, like 1 day at a time, they have 3 shifts, morning, noon time, and afternoon, to capture the diurnal difference of air pollution in the city. And they would either walk or bike or drive if it's an outer range to different places and measure the air pollution levels. And then, so there are also some challenges when they do this task because we cannot predict weather. And when they did this, like the first time, it was a mild rainy day, and it's, the air pollution level is definitely is not that high. And then there are, you sometimes have to have weather cooperating. But if you do this more times, then you can tease out the weather effect. And then for the sampling work, they do show that there are, even though the pattern is not consistent, but the Madison Park neighborhood have relatively higher concentrations than the other places. And then in addition to the concerns of the local communities for their neighborhoods, there are workers in Santa Ana who works in this derby industry, and they raised concerns about their occupational exposure to air pollution. So they demand more work to measure air pollutants, and also for the academics to provide them with evidences to show their exposures. So we worked with them and again use the very small sensor, and also equipped them with a GPS data logger. So therefore we know where they go, and even inside their industrial facility, and also record at the same time real-time air monitoring data. So this is just an illustration of their working environment, and what are the hotspots, and what are the activities of their operations that may increase the air pollution levels, such as welding. You can see this red boxes, and those are the welding activities, and then the orange is grinding and cutting and sanding. Definitely this increase their personal air pollution exposures. And then this is my last slide. So we also plot the air pollution. In this case is fine particulate matter, PM2.5. PM2.5, those of you don't know that, it's the fine particulate matter less than 2.5 micrometer. And it's in a relative sense, it's 30 times less than the diameter of your hair. So it's very, very small and easily maintainable, and can penetrate the lung and cause a lot of adverse health impacts. So for the PM2.5 concentrations, you can see all of these peaks, spikes, and very often while they are in their work duties, the concentration of PM2.5 can be at an unhealthy level, and sometimes can be very unhealthy for the workers. So we provided such information to the workers so that they can further use those to demonstrate their hazardous working environment, and use that to improve their environment while they're working. So I guess that's it for me. Yeah, I will welcome questions.
Thank you, Dr. Jun, for that amazing work you've done with the city of Santa Ana. We are moving to the Q&A portion of this session, and we'll welcome our panelists to sit at the front with. Okay. I personally have some questions for you, but first we will hear from the BAF fellows. And also, Julian, please indicate if we have any questions in the chat on Zoom. Oh.
Hello. Okay. Thank you, everyone, or thank you both for your presentations. My name is Cristina Muñoz de la Torre. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Iowa and a senior researcher at the Solutions Collective. This question is directed to Dr. McGuire. I have two questions. The first one is what kinds, so I saw, for example, in the like the closing part, you mentioned different publishing in different formats, co-publishing as well. What kind of other benefits do you practice when it comes to community-based research that is more aligned with perhaps community needs? So the first question, if you can give examples of other benefits that is that you kind of prepare within the grant proposals and stuff like that. And then my second question is, if you can brainstorm with me a little bit about potential benefits and challenges of increasing those benefits if there was an external organization, nonprofit organization that's more at the national level or grass tops that already has like relationships with like frontline communities to kind of help partner researchers with community-based groups. So obviously like the research, I think you guys call it you didn't call it center, it's just research shop, right? It's building that relationship over the long term. I can see it's doing amazing work. But then we have some singular scholars in universities or departments that don't have those centers, but who practice that kind of research. And so they don't have institutional resources yet. So again, back to the second question, is there a need for such an external partner? And what kind of benefits could they bring to help both academics continue to do their research, but also like be an advocate or some kind of mediator for community members? Thank you.
Yeah, great questions. I really appreciate those. They're helping me think too about other models. So maybe I'll take the last one first because it's most fresh in my mind. I think that's a really interesting idea, and yeah, definitely want to acknowledge that there's folks doing this kind of work all over the place, kind of alone. It's like managing to do community-based research and connecting with grassroots community organizations and grassroots organizations as well, right? I think one of the ideas of the shop is really how to scale that up, right? So it's not just individuals, but that we have a community and we're sharing practices and also just training the future generations, right? So bringing cohorts through who then they're going to go on and when they're professors or if they're working at a NGO, they're going to be sharing these practices, right? So that's sort of the scaling up model. But I really like this idea or this question about sort of the larger nonprofit kind of grass tops organizations and the capacity that they have to play a similar role. And I could imagine that. And I actually have an experience of the Urban Institute in Washington, DC. A former colleague of mine is down there, and she's been, we've kind of been having these like parallel lives. And she and some colleagues there have started what they call a community engaged research center or something like that. And so they're really working, the Urban has lots of different topics that they work on, but they work a lot in like the federal government funding space. So they've been doing a lot of like technical assistance and collaboration and advising to actually government entities about how to sort of incorporate some of these practices as requirements into grants and how to do that in ways that actually aligns with what is useful for communities and which doesn't perpetuate certain kinds of violence, right? So a lot of research language can be really that's sort of taking a trauma-informed approach. Basically, a lot of research language can be very objectifying, which specific communities have a lot of, for example, the people who are living without housing or people who have been in the welfare system, et cetera, on public assistance, right? They have a lot of experience with violent language, supporting the government agencies that are creating funding opportunities to change that language through doing research with communities about that, if that makes sense. So that's an example that I know of a kind of cross organization that is playing kind of a similar role to RJS, but in a different space. Not so much. I think they do partner with university folks sometimes, but they haven't. I guess they was more effective than another organization, right? That's like connected to the UN or might be what a big institution is. Whether it's the University of California, or whether it's the U.S. government or the state of California, state of Iowa. So I see that there's a kind of a similar bridging role. So that's what that comment made me think of. And then in terms of benefits, we've been, I'll say, like, as I mentioned, kind of being this like workshop space, where we often see ourselves like experimenting and trying things out with our community-based organizations. So around reading, we're currently experimenting with one of our firms that we use. We place fellows we have a team of fellows who, as in a facilitator role, in a team science facilitator role, working the org as a co-PI with a bunch of, including Jun and many other folks who are probably on Zoom, and folks in the room maybe, who are working with this organization, Green MPNA, that has a particularly large capacity to collaborate with researchers because of their history and their staff and stuff. But so we're bringing in fellows in a team science facilitator role. And in the past year, they've started to develop tools to help streamline the grant writing process for the nonprofit organization, so that when a call comes out, they can have a process. And actually, doing this on the subcommittee, we had a subcommittee, and so so that if a call comes out and multiple people in this collaborative of people who are working with the nonprofit organization have ideas for grants, instead of all of individually contacting the org and saying, do you want to go for this grant with me? There's a process for the whole group and a process for the organization to kind of evaluate what their capacity is for that and what would be required. And then also creating a system. So that's just a question of like coordination, right? And then another one that they came up with, again, in part of this conversation with the org, Jun as on the subcommittee, was basically creating like a repository of, it's like such minutia, but like this is the kind of stuff that takes so much time and it's so frustrating, and it's like 50 emails to get one form signed because you don't understand what it is, right? So creating a repository of the forms that are required for different funding agencies, and having like templates of them that the organization has like in a secure place, but then they can share them with people so that it can get the process going faster, because these grant applications are like so cumbersome. And community-based organizations, unlike the university, don't have a whole business office that's like care of it. They may or may not even have a grant writer ready to pass with it, but likely wouldn't know all the compliance rules and stuff like that. So that's just a couple of things that benefits that I would say have just been collaborations, that have been through these conversations.
Hello, my name is Tamara Doss. I am a doctoral student at Jacksonville State University in Alabama. There are a lot of older homes. This is for you, Dr. Wu. A lot of older homes in my community that were built prior to 1972 that are still being occupied. So I have two questions. How does long-term exposure to varying levels of lead in the environment impact the cognitive development of children? And what specific cognitive functions or domains are most affected by lead toxicity?
So like a lot of house plants and previously back in 1970s, 80s, there are researchers looking at the health impact of lead based on relatively high concentrations, including IQ loss and less desired school performance, lower scores in math, English, and other things, and lower high school graduate rate, etc. And the understanding of how lower level of lead, as we see it right now compared to many years ago, especially the chronic effects, is still ongoing research. Actually, we UCI and also Orange County Department of Justice and the Green MPNA received NIH R1 grant earlier this year to look at the low level exposure to that and the children's developmental outcomes. So we just kicked off the study a few months ago. And the idea for us is that we are going to collect the children's deciduous tooth, like the baby tooth from the children. And then based on that, we're going to analyze the long-term And since the baby in utero exposure, from that time till when the time the tooth was shed. So we have chronic exposure profile at a relatively high temporal resolution, like a couple of weeks. So you can see this is a long-term exposure. And then we can also capture some other metals to see whether those interactions of other metals with lead on children's developmental outcomes. So this is a new project we're working on. I hope that in a few years, we may be able to add on to the literature on how the chronic and the relatively low level of exposure could have an impact on the children in Santa Ana and probably many other places, because Santa Ana has high lead levels in the soil, but it's not just Santa Ana. In all the older cities, and because we show the contribution from the traffic emissions, right? In older cities, I can say a lot of cities in the United States have historical traffic emissions that have lead paint. So likely this would influence a very large population. What did I answer?
Yes. Hi, my name is Mason Alexander. I am a PhD student at Texas A&M. I don't know if this is on. Okay, and my question is for Dr. McGuire. Given the lack of funding for longitudinal studies, particularly in public health fields and other fields, when you're doing community engaged research, how do you reduce the research can inevitably be extractive because projects are going to end. So I was just wondering, how do you reduce research being extractive given the barriers of getting funding for longitudinal studies, and that once projects end and collaboration end with communities, you're going to be leaving regardless? And my second question is, and to tailor on that first one, do you have any recommendations for potentially writing in implementation funding or funding at the end in a proposal? And my second question is, do you have different processes for guiding researchers who are not representative of the community that they're researching?
Yeah. Yeah, so in terms of that, I can just talk about how we are imagining or how it's been working for us with trying to support ongoing research. So I think that if the folks that you're collaborating with are aware, first of all, often nonprofit organizations are also grant funded, so they're very aware of the way that these grant cycles work. So it's not an unfamiliar dynamic, right? And so if and when they are involved in the process from the beginning, right, then they're really aware of sort of the sunsetting of grants. So that's one thing. Just that's one of the benefits, right? Instead of bringing people in sort of after the projects are already defined, having relationships with folks who you can bring into the grant writing process and conceiving of it. So then they can also plan for that. Their staffing, like they do with all their grants. Okay, we're about halfway through this grant. We need to apply for something else as a staff person. So that's just sort of structurally the nature of being grant funded. But in particular on research projects, that one of the things that we've seen is that sort of there become like there's like the research activities, but then there's like these adjacent activities that are also supported by the grant that might be related to these advocacy or city council or advocacy at the state or some kind of like political movement that happens that isn't directly funded by the research, but the whole project is really supporting that, and that is something that will have another phase, right? That's not necessarily funded by the research, and so what we see like the shop doing or other entities like the shop, so like these other kind of bridging entities, is there a place where in our case we use a fellowship program where the sort of a set of fellows cycle in and out, but the project will be and continue. So like we think of it like a baton, so there's the baton that's like the project might be changing over time, but the next set of fellows can like take it, learn about it from the fellows or from the staff, explain the situation and what it is, and help orient them to the organization and then take it to the next level. So if the fellows are funded, even if the particularities of the research have ended, these sort of research adjacent tasks can be taken on by these fellows who have the continuity. That makes sense. So it's like creating another entity, like a research support entity or a research center that has this additional capacity to support people to stay on. So that, yeah. And then in terms of implementation funding, I guess I don't have that much experience with that. I mean, I think it sounds good. June might know more.
Just an example, for the study I talked about, it's a 5-year study we call iClean. And we built in a pilot project mechanism in that study. And then at a later stage of the study, we are going to work with the community partners to issue calls for the pilot projects so that community members can apply and then can really do some practical and more implementation type of work related to lead mitigation.
So like sub.
Yeah.
So it's like a sub award.
Yeah.
Into the bigger grant.
Hi, my name is Felicia Henry. Thank you so much for both of your presentations. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Delaware. So I have a couple of questions, one of which I want to tailor on to what you were just talking about, Dr. McGuire. So 2 questions for you. How do you mitigate some of the challenges that you talked about in your presentation with community partners, in particular, not being paid for a long time, right? Some of these grants take a very long time to dish out money. Some of it is reimbursement based, and some of these community partners do not have thousands of dollars to spend to get it back later. So how do you mitigate some of that where you're designing the research projects? And then in what you were just talking about, what was the question? I just lost it. It's blank. I'll come back to that. Yeah, I'll come back to it. And then the other question is for both of you, how do you, what is your currency in your field, in your academic field, and how do you essentially make this work valuable to the powers that be, so to speak, in a way that they actually continue to support instead of challenge your work?
And I also remembered to answer the question about what you're not a part of. But makes sense. I didn't answer your question about communities that you're not a I think you meant like other ethnicities or other.
Yeah, like you just don't represent.
Yeah.
Sorry, and I just remember the other thing that was blank, which was, sorry. So, and both of you actually mentioned a lot of grant specific funding. And so is there anything that's built into your work that would advocate or lobby to have some of this be written into local or state budget lines so that it wouldn't just be grant funded, folks would actually be stabilized across the years?
So yeah, in terms of the challenges with community partners, I think, I think the like I said, when I was talking, I think it's increasingly encouraged by the funders to, and valued. Sorry, thank you. Increasingly valued in the reviewer process. About this more than I do, but have the community partners as co-Is or co-PIs or PIs, and have adequate funding for the time that they're going to be allotted. The real challenge is, I think, one of the really big challenges is overhead. Another really big challenge is that it's really hard to know how long they're going to take and how much time they're going to take. And so, especially for groups with less research experience, they may not know exactly how much work it's going to take them to support a focus group or a bunch of focus groups, right? And so there's just kind of the nature of that. And so, with more experience and/or with getting support, having explicit conversations about that, I think, in those budgeting conversations. And then I do think it would be great and really important. I mean, I think mostly within the university system about so beyond grant specific funding, but yeah. So I'm on soft money. I don't have, I'm not a master, so all my money is raised. We have to raise our own salaries. But there are universities that have, many different universities. Often they have big endowments, from somebody who donated money, but they often also have funding that comes through the university. That's just a line or multiple lines to support this kind of collaboration, like Center for Community Engagement, that kind of thing, or for community engaged research in particular. So definitely pushing within institutions to that, that grants can fund research, but there's all this other kind of staff support that's needed to support coordination and needed to support the training. So for sure. And then my current thesis, I'm quickly not not a professor. My currency is really the fellows who go through the program and sort of where they go, what they do. So I would say that, and then just the development of the programs, being able to articulate what that is and what its value is. Yeah, and so ours is about the numbers of people who come through. And then I'll pass it to June, but we're just on the working with folks, working in groups that you are not a part of them, or you don't represent them. I would say the value that we really hold is cultural humility, right? And so there's, for me as a white person, but I think for everyone, especially for white people, right? There's a particular role of taking on an anti-racist practice and thinking of that and having a lifelong anti-racist practice and decolonial practice, and knowing that that's a lifelong journey in all the spaces that people are in, and educating oneself about the histories of the violence of research, right? And also just gaining capacity to be with to be with the discomfort of that, or the challenges of that, and things. So the role, sure most of you have heard of this, but the difference between sort of what was called the cultural competency model and now cultural committed model, right, is to say that it's not about becoming competent in any particular culture, right? It's more about understanding what you don't know, knowing that you don't know things, being receptive to learning, and to the discomfort of making mistakes or doing things that might be harmful, and figuring out how to repair and being in relationship with people so that repair can happen. So I think that is a huge part of this work, definitely for white people, but also for all people who are working in multicultural societies.
So in terms of funding space, I have 2 points. One is that it's true that it's challenging to get funding for everyone, academic and community partners, but it's increasing at least for the federal, state level, for the community funding. So that's a good sign, and hopefully with that trend, the community partners can get more involved and can cultivate their capacity. So in the future, they will be have more capacity and more expertise in getting the fund to support their work. And then also at the federal level, for the grant we received, there's a lot of times there will be budget cut. And then sometimes 20-30% cut, then we have to decide who's going to bear the cut. And for instance, for this study we have, I think we get 20-30% cut, and we decided not to cut the community partners. So UCI will bear all the cuts. And fortunately, we can leverage resources from some programs like the climate justice program Catherine is leading, so that we can have some student support to do data collection, etc. So I feel it's important to have a proper level of funding given to the community partners, and also you have to be smart to get resources from different entities. And also, I think good to collaborate with partners at the university level. And then the other thing about power, I feel I think I can see the capacity building piece really pays itself off over the long run. I feel in the very beginning, definitely you need to put a lot of time and effort to build a relationship, to raise awareness, to raise the leaders of the community, which was true for our collaboration with Orange County Environmental Justice and with the Green MPMA. But just over a few years, 2 or 3 years, I would say, you can see their leaders are growing, and they know more about the health impacts of the land and the air pollution, environmental justice, and then they can further deliver the message and advocate for their community. So I feel we do need to put energy, but it's not like every single day we have to put a lot of time. So it's like the capacity building process is really great.
While you're on the topic, Dr. Jun, thanks for your professor. Could you expatiate on your own aspect of what you do?
Okay,
Yeah, and how does it work? Your own part.
yeah.
Yeah.
My own currency,
Yeah.
like, the question was like, so how do you, so like, since it's like a less traditional, like the standard currency is like, you know, peer reviewed article and this work. See it.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, my background was in environmental engineering, environmental health. So I've never thought about myself doing the community center work. So in my earlier stage of my career, I did a lot of publications, just trunking data, and then doing like patterns show, oh, here's the environmental justice issue, but not truly community embedded research. I feel in the past 6-7 years, it's really empowering myself to see the community issues and to provide evidences so that community members can use that to make a change. So I feel that part really is, I'm really grateful for that, to see the change and to see something good in the general plan, and to say they're doing some projects to reduce lead in the soil, and also and they're going to have more to come. So I feel that it won't be replaced by the publication, and also even the university is kind of not in the like same level of progression in terms of like this type of work, like in terms of tenure review, like it's still evaluate the publications and grants more than anything else. But I think there is this diversity statement for your review, which was added a few years ago by the university. So in that, you can show your work with the community, and that is started to be valued. So I think I appreciate that. We are
Ariga, it's Inupiaq, it means it is good. My Inupiaq name is Kanak. My legal name is Bernae Berner. Greatly honored and excited by the presentation, so thank you very much, Dr. Wu. I'll have a follow-up question that pertains to my own research and methods that I will try and reach out to you for. I really do appreciate, so on a general question or scale, the presentation on the dealing with racial and structural racism. I had heard the term policy violence, and it is something that we in this room, I think, just know all too well, from issues that are commonly known, the redlining, in my own culture, or for American Indians, Alaska Natives, the criminalizing of our spiritual practices and beliefs, forced relocation, forced sterilization, all policies that have directly impacted our peoples have also, and you've addressed some of these in your presentation. I have been part of the establishment of the tribal epidemiology centers back in the 90s. And through that process, the tribes have identified research practices, CBPR, I'm a huge fan of it. But now I'm really excited to see that they are demanding basically that they take a co-production of knowledge. And with that includes the disbursement of resources. And so that and for me, but hopefully for others and beyond tribal communities, this means that fiscal responsibility for the grant funding actually goes to those communities that are directly impacted by the research. And so that's building that sort of relationship. So I'm getting to, we're very contextual people. So having provided that context, we know that there are institutionalized challenges within that. And so university systems also depend on resources, how open or what sort of practices, movements, paradigm shifts are you seeing in a university environment that supports that sort of co-production of knowledge that isn't just words, but also actions and being able to support other entities, in our case, the tribal epidemiology centers, being the fiscally responsible agent and implementing that kind of research. Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate your all the context and just everything that you said. I don't necessarily, I have ideas about how that might be happening or is happening in small ways, but more I have hope for like this conversations like this, and like all of you being part of processes of making you know, fellowship application processes, grant application processes, right? Like being there to say like this, it can't just be optional, or we can't say we want to have you know, we want to give extra points if they have a community group engaged in co-design. We have to say that they also have to write that into their budget, that they need to be funded, or, you know, we need to, it's from the backside, if you know, you think about of the policy part, you know, you have to like write all of that stuff in, and it has to be people like us who are going to be the people engaging and pushing back against those things. And so a lot of the ways that I see that is like in these like very, it's kind of like, I think of it as kind of like the anthropology of bureaucracy, right? It's like, what are the bureaucratic structures that are like keeping some of these inequities in place? And they're many fronts, and it's hard to change them, right? It's hard to get the university to change a form, you know, and it can happen, but they might have to call a committee, right? And then you gotta get multiple people and their input, and that's how bureaucracy is, right? But so for folks to be kind of educated and aware that you know, when you're engaging with a form like that, that is what's happening. This is part of like what the structural violence of policy is and how it plays out is through these forms, right? Then impactfully people talk about this and it's funded, supported, right? So I guess that's my, you know, my hopeful part about it is that as we talk about it more and we talk about the power of these things, that we'll be in places where we can impact that. So thank you for sharing, you know, your context. That's really. You have any?
We are a little bit above time, but we have time for.
It's really quick. I actually just put, is this one? This one? Okay. I just wanted to ask, who's your connection at Urban Institute? Who's the colleague?
Oh yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. You should be. I think it's called the Center.
It just found her. Thank you. She's just first one. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Maybe some wrong data. Could you maybe please share with us the kind of feedback you have got? And maybe what keeps you going to this work? Because I know sometimes it's a lot of things that happen that makes you think twice and just so if we're engaged. What
You've got to vote, so she'll go first.
Yeah. I would say the communities we work with, they are grateful of the time and effort of the UCI faculty and students to help them with some technical stuff. And also I realized that it's much more complex. You should to solve real problem than just put some numbers on the paper. For instance, we collaborated with the Green and PMA and published a paper to show the fireworks impact on air quality in Santa Ana. That has been a long issue in Santa Ana. Like every year during the July the 4th episodes, there are like several days of extremely high air pollution levels. We had this problem showing, and but then what is the next step? And then they really wanted to work with the city government to solve the problem. For instance, to put like illegal fireworks or even some individual use of fireworks to be banned. However, later they found out that a lot of these local vendors and these families, and I guess the small vendors, they rely on this to get money, sell of the fireworks to get money. So those are poor families, and so then it's complex. You should not just after you buy that, they don't have the money, income resources. What are we going to do with that next? So maybe raise awareness. So those are a lot of like ongoing work to do with the community, but I feel like both sides feel we learn a lot from each other, and thank you. So thank you.
Thank you, June. Thank you. Yeah, so it is time for lunch. So let's take a break. We're gonna reconvene here at 1:15 ideally. So we'll don't go too far.
You don't know.